One.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Objective, and today we are going to be celebrating International Women's Day. Now, I don't want to come off like Piers Morgan. There's a reference you British people know. Piers Morgan, you know, he's always so snarky. Hey, I thought every day was Women's Day, and he's always sort of putting down that type of thing. Now, when we talk about it, I think we're a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a little bit kind of like, oh, you want Women's Day? Let us tell you about some of our favorite women. And it's not might not be the type of ball busting sort of anti-Western feminists that you were hoping for. But beyond that, I think we're sincere. We're like, yeah, you know what? Women do exist. They do have distinct qualities that should be celebrated. And when a woman is strong, when a woman is following her conviction, that is feminine. That is the a woman's version of being independent and rational and all of those things. So why not celebrate Women's Day, and why not point out some of our favorite women? And what we are going to do today is discuss fictional women. How about that? Fictional women as depicted by Ayn Rand in her novels. So we've each got a favorite heroine, and we have not yet discussed if we have the same one. So let's find out. God forbid, though, we get right to the topic. Let me just tell you a quick side tangent. I think there was an episode of Leonard Peikoff's podcast where he was asked, were you and Ayn Rand on first name basis? Like, did you used to call Miss Rand by her first name? And as I recall, Leonard's answer was to tell the story of how he began calling Ayn Rand by her first name. They were on a road trip together and having a discussion, a group of them in the car. And they were discussing Atlas Shrugged. This was after the book had been published. And Leonard Peikoff asked Ayn Rand if Dagny was the heroine, but he couldn't pronounce the word correctly at that time. So he accidentally said, is Dagny the heroine? That's how he pronounced it, heroine. And Ayn Rand thought he was asking, is Dagny the hero? And then saying her name, Ayn. And she responded, certainly not. I don't mean to mock her accent. That's just kind of my default. Certainly not. And she began to expand. And from that point forward, Leonard Peikoff was comfortable calling Ayn Rand by her first name. And we also could sort of get from that story that technically someone like Dagny Taggart is not the hero of the book. However, I am comfortable acting as though really any positively depicted woman in any of Ayn Rand's novels can be referred to as a heroine. I'm fine with that. But let's discuss it. Let's bring on a guy who, he's depicted a hero, and he's also, my understanding is depicted a bad guy, right? Lucifer doesn't have the best reputation, but honestly, if the devil did exist, I think he would be a good guy, because God likes a rigged game, to quote Jack Nicholson. Please welcome Mark Pellegrino.
Thank you, Rucka. Yeah, she might not have been the hero of Atlas Shrugged, but she's certainly a hero of Atlas Shrugged. And is that your, not to jump straight into it, but is that your heroine?
I was actually not sure, and I was going to wait to see who you had, and then I was going to probably name somebody different. So there you go. What do you think?
I bet you don't have mine. I bet you don't have mine. So go ahead.
Okay, can I guess real quick? Is it Cheryl from Atlas Shrugged?
No, but that's really sweet.
I think it's Kira. Am I right?
Yeah, that's very good. Now, why did you say that? Because you've heard me say that We the Living is my favorite book.
I don't know if I heard that, but it's like the non-obvious answer, but it's still a rich answer. There's a lot to discuss there. It just, it feels like Dagny would be the obvious one. And then like Dominique we're scared to kind of go near it, or maybe you're not, but I don't want to even explain what's good. It's such a complex character, and not clearly a heroine, right?
Yes, I hate Dominique.
Wow. Okay. Those are fighting words around here. Maybe we'll get into that as well.
Sure.
But let's, can you tell us a little bit about Kira Arghanova?
Well, I mean, the whole book is I haven't read it in about 25, 30 years, but the whole book is my favorite because it reads like a real narrative as opposed to anything didactic, anything preachy about philosophy. You're living through the story of these people who have their lives stolen from them and then are trying to at first live and then break away from communist living. And so she strikes me as somebody who's very accessible to me. She doesn't speak like a philosopher. She doesn't act, I mean, like a philosopher. She doesn't act like like a Dagny who could fly a plane and she can solve the problems of the railroad, and she talks like a philosopher. Everybody is so pitched to a degree that it's sort of beyond my, it's not really tangible to me. But Kira is a real person who's living in a world and is trying to master her own fate despite the stuff that's going on around her.
Yeah, and Kira in We the Living is dedicated from a young age to her passion, which is engineering. And even in 1920 or 1910 or whenever that book begins to take place, she wants to be an engineer. So at the time that Ayn Rand published that book, I think it was controversial to depict a heroine that wants to be an engineer, let alone to base it on Russia 20 years earlier or sometime earlier. So Ayn Rand and her characters were definitely trailblazers, not for feminism, maybe, because that word has so many connotations at this point, but sort of in the most basic kind of fundamental essence of what I think feminism was meant to be, or how it was pitched originally, is just that women who wish to be independent ought to not be hindered. So what I like about Kira from We the Living, and if you were going to name, let's say, Dagny, I probably would have pitched or named Kira as mine, just so we have variety. That dedication from a young age to a certain passion and not taking no for an answer, not caring what anybody says, and can we spoil? Let's spoil, I guess, or being willing to risk a very dark fate, let's say. That doesn't quite spoil anything that much, but it doesn't. You can't, honestly, you can't really spoil an Ayn Rand novel either way. I hear people talk about, oh, don't spoil Atlas Shrugged. You cannot spoil Atlas Shrugged. I knew what Atlas Shrugged was about before I read it, and nothing was spoiled. But anyway, Kira is willing to risk it all. She'd rather risk death than give up.
You can't spoil an Ayn Rand novel because they mostly end heroically, right? I mean, you know that values are going to win, reason's going to win, but that was not necessarily the case in We the Living. So you can spoil it, actually, because it's definitely a turn away from where she ended up going with all of her fiction.
But you hear people saying like, oh, don't spoil Atlas Shrugged by saying that it's about the minds of the world going on strike or something on that, like that. But yeah, it's probably on the jacket of the book, right? And it's like right on the back of the book. And I knew that was the point, the theme of the book before I read it. When I picked up We the Living, someone saw me reading it and said, oh, that's a sad book, they said. So in a sense, I knew there was a sad ending. So, but yeah, the fact that Kira would rather risk death than live without pursuing her central purpose, I think shows a young Ayn Rand with the basics down of who she is and what her philosophy is about. What blows my mind is that We the Living, I think, was published when Rand was probably younger than I am now. I think she was like early 30s, right? 30 or so. Maybe she was writing it in her late 20s or something. And she, at that point, had written lots of short stories and made plenty of stuff. So that's a bit mind-blowing, isn't it? But also when you kind of realize what objectivism would become, the fact it would have an epistemology that answers Plato once and for all, that it would have an ethics that solves all of these dichotomies of the ages. It is kind of mind-blowing or very interesting to just see in We the Living the very sort of early version, really, of objectivism in a way, just kind of like Ayn Rand's perspective of the world, when I think Kira says in the book that to live is to value. To live is to value. That's such a rich identification. And kind of the rest of the philosophy can almost be sort of inferred in a sense from that statement, though very few people could actually go do that. And luckily, Ayn Rand lived long enough to do so. Very glad Ayn Rand did escape from Russia. Imagine Ayn Rand was unable to do that. Imagine our lives, and imagine really the world. It's hard to even imagine how much positive influence Ayn Rand has had. But yeah, Kira Arghanova is your choice. I'm going to go with Dagny. I'm going to say, look, I'm not a literary expert. I'm not like, this is not my calling in life so much, but I'll say sort of as a layman, Dagny to me seems kind of like a mature version of Kira in a sense. Older and more seasoned in her craft, in her industry, and playing more of an executive role in a company full of people. But like Kira, she had a passion from a young age and would rather like maybe have fewer friends than compromise her passion, compromise her values. So she's dedicated to her work from a very young age, and she spends her days and nights getting good at her work and doing it, and having an appreciation for beauty in the world. She, her mother throws a ball, throws a like a sort of banquet event, and Dagny likes the idea of it, though she is disappointed in how it goes and some of the people she meets there. But it is notable that she liked the idea of the banquet and was looking forward to it and participated in the banquet. So she's a sort of a, I guess, a brain, you might dub her, like a very, very active-minded, deep thinker, but not like not this sort of detached, sort of nerdy character that is detached from reality. She deals with reality. She deals with moving trains, and she has an appreciation for beauty and sex and all of the great things that life has to offer. So Dagny's pretty good, right?
Dagny rocks. She does.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on Dagny, or should we argue about Dominique, or what?
Yeah, let's argue about Dominique, because I think anybody can like Dagny.
Oh, all right.
But you really have to be on your game or something to like Dominique, because I think she's a horrible person.
Wow. Okay. Look, I mean,
hate Dominique.
I particularly did not pick Dominique. Well, partially because she's technically not a hero either, and probably would not qualify on any grounds as the heroine of the novel. But even beyond that, she's so complex. Like, to go with Dominique or Gail Winan, like, these are complex characters. Dominique even more than Gail. On some level, I relate to Gail. We're both male, et cetera, right? Dominique to me is, I keep saying Dominique and then switching to Dominique, but she's on some next level complexity. And I think Ayn Rand has described Dominique as herself in a bad mood. So it's very interesting that she's able to depict that character based on how she feels at times and how she sort of views the world when she's in a bad mood. So Dominique, through most of the novel, certainly at the start of the novel, has what you would call malevolent universe premise. She sees the world as fundamentally unhospitable, not hospitable for heroes. And along with that, heroes are nowhere to be found. So Dominique throws beautiful art down the shaft, down to its destruction, because it, like, the world doesn't deserve it. That's very early book Dominique.
Yeah, that's sort of textbook narcissism too. To say that she doesn't think good can flourish in the world, and yet to see beauty, to see it actually there, to see it appreciated on enough of a level to exist, and then to destroy it because other people than you, that is, are not worthy of looking at it. Ugh, it's cringy. It's just so cringy. And then she sees the living embodiment of virtue in Howard Rourke and tries to destroy him and punishes herself by marrying these twats. It's like, she's just a strange, narcissistic intellectual masturbator. She really makes me cringe.
Are you generally a fan of The Fountainhead?
I'm a fan of Rourke. I'm a fan of the ideas in The Fountainhead for sure. I'm a fan of the way he stands up to the world. I'm a fan of the way he promotes his vision, and I'm also a fan of Cameron too. I saw what destroyed him, and I see that in really some great actors. I see that it's easy to get caught up in the world in a way that can be very destructive. And I feel great empathy for Cameron never having the spiritual stature that Rourke had. But I can't stand Dominique. I just can't stand her.
Yeah. So the first time I read The Fountainhead, I was upset by Dominique's choices. Like when she and Rourke first got together at one point early in the book or midway through it, I'm like thinking like, oh, like where does the plot even go from here? This really cool, self-confident and righteous character found himself a bombshell, and she's been sort of holding out thus far. But now she found a guy that rocks her world, and great, like that's that. But no, she ends up, yeah, like you said, she marries Keating, she marries Gail Wynand, and
I mean that's the worst. She marries Keating. She's not even fooled. It's not like she's fooled by him. She's not like a Cheryl in Atlas Shrugged. She knows what she's getting into.
Right, but when you consider the end of the novel, when Dominique realizes, she learns that lesson that you might say is like Ayn Rand coming out of her bad mood and kind of realizing the bad is unimportant. What matters is the good. Kind of what matters are the values that I have. And then she runs towards Rourke. Like once she gets it, she gets it. So in order to bring about that ending, you sort of have to take her on that very ugly detour, literarily.
I agree with you. And there are some characters who have tremendous arcs like that, and I could follow them from the beginning. And maybe there's a save the cat moment in all of those other stories that makes me really empathize with the person. I don't empathize with her at all. I can empathize with the Cameron. I can empathize with Rourke. And Rourke really doesn't have an arc. Rourke is the same character from the beginning to the end. He's an enlightened being. But I see him as the only one who really loves. He's, I could get on his page 100%. I can't get on hers. I know she has the arc. I know she has the realization. I know she comes around to seeing reality the way it is, but I don't care.
Well, you like Rourke. What do you think of Rourke? Sort of, I mean, there's so many things that happen in novels that maybe wouldn't happen in real life. So a real life Rourke probably would not be interested in a woman that goes off, marries Keating, marries Wynand, right? But in art, these things are sort of there for a reason. So you like Rourke. Now in the novel, Rourke, he tells Dagny, like, you need to learn this lesson for yourself. Like in essence, I'll wait for you or something like that. Is that something you admire in a man's actions?
I admire that he has that kind of insight into people's souls. I admire that he's innocent. And I do like that he was able to penetrate her in a way that I couldn't. So he knew what she was all about and knew why she did what she did, and was able to get beyond the moment to the end game and play the end game. I don't think I would have that kind of insight with somebody like her. She just comes off as a pompous, arrogant, spoiled narcissist, and I don't know that I would have the sharpness or the time, the inclination to get underneath that festering sore on the surface.
Interesting. By the way, I mentioned on some level I can relate to Wynand. I can relate to this sort of like kind of difficult childhood and like kind of learning some harsh lessons about the world and taking maybe at times a sort of misguided attempt to kind of take control of my life. But one thing about Wynand I could never relate to is wanting to control people, like wanting to have power over people and influence them and stop people from pursuing their own conviction, their own passion. In that respect, I think I'm the opposite of Wynand. I tend to encourage my friends, encourage people to act, like you've got raw talent. Like, what are you doing with your time? Like, get out there and do it. So in that respect, Wynand is someone else I can't relate to at all. I don't get, why would Rourke be drawn to such a schmuck. But again, The Fountainhead is such a deeply psychological book. It could take maybe a lifetime to really understand why Rand made the choices that she does with her characters. So similarly with Dominique, there's so much about the character I can't quite understand and can't therefore understand why Rourke sort of puts up with it. But at the end of the day, kind of by the end of the novel, I kind of start to see why everything was necessary. But you know, she's no hero of yours, Dominique.
No hero of mine.
Interesting. If The Fountainhead is made into a movie, would you be willing to be a redhead and, you know, have some?
Too old to play Rourke, but I would definitely go for Cameron. I think he's a very poignant character.
Yeah, I could. From what I picture him, I can imagine you as Cameron. They might need to make you a bit older though. I mean, they'll make you a little wrinkly and stuff.
And he's a little hefty from what I remember. I'd have to put on a little bit of weight. No, I don't have to do that. I can wear a fat suit.
There you go. Maybe I'll try to audition for Stephen Mallory. I think I could throw a tantrum and maybe play that sort of beta role. I don't think our paths will ever cross in the novel unless they turn it into sort of a loosely interpreted version of events, and we do end up crossing paths. But I don't think
I'm sure Hollywood would have to loosely interpret it. I don't think they understand the meaning of the book. Wow.
Bite the hand that feeds you, will you? So, all right. Go ahead.
I only say that because I have some recent experience with pitching a show to some fairly prominent folks. So I can see that they don't understand Rand's work.
Oh, okay. Now you've mentioned recently something relating to that. Is this something you want to go into more detail right now, or should we bookmark that for another day?
We could bookmark it. Yeah.
All right. So
let's see what happens in the next year.
So everyone subscribe and share, subscribe, become a member of Ayn Rand Center UK to learn more about this as soon as it's fresh off the press. Thank you for the super chats, LMH, Robert, and Mary-Aline. Mary and Christopher. Mary-Aline says, Dominique wants to protect Rourke from Cameron's end. She doesn't understand how strong Rourke is. What do you think?
So beat the crap out of him and destroy him. Come on. That's not protection to me.
Andrew Bernstein says it's an honor killing or a mercy killing, not honor killing, mercy killing. Do you think it's more of an honor killing? Was that Freudian?
It's effed up is what it is.
Yeah.
If with friends protecting me like that, who needs enemies? I think Rourke was doing just fine. And maybe she doesn't get it. She doesn't know how powerful he is, and he's a spiritual giant. But still, don't sacrifice me. Please don't nail me to the cross. Just because you're doing it first before the community doesn't make you great. I don't know. Yeah. Somebody can convince me in Clubhouse that Dominique deserves my praise, because right now I don't like her.
We will be jumping on Clubhouse right after this episode. All right, Dominique is not your girl. I mentioned Cheryl from Atlas Shrugged. As much as she's definitely not like a heroic character, still very relatable.
She is. She's like she understands. She has a visceral sense of what's good, just like Eddie Willers does. They have a visceral sense of what's good. They're attracted to the positive, the creative force in these people in their lives, and Cheryl in what she thought was a creative force, but it turns out not to be.
Yeah, so Atlas Shrugged sort of highlights how certain people are so genius that they sort of carry the rest of us like Atlas carries the world. But at the same time, Rand is not treating the average ambitious, average intelligence person like they're just this dispensable peasant. Absolutely not. Rand is showing that they're capable of rising to their own full potential.
And I think that's where she's different than pretty much every philosopher and academic and elitist out there who has total contempt for the everyday folks on the ground. Rand never felt that.
Very true. And finally, I guess we'll just mention the female in Anthem, whose name was it Equality was the one guy, and then the other was I don't remember. Someone in the chat room will mention it.
Yeah, probably, I forget what her number was.
Yeah. So she's pretty good, right? It takes a lot of courage.
Well, she just loves her guy. I mean, that's what she does.
but to be willing to follow your guy away from everything you've ever known, especially in such a cultish environment where there's no alternative. It's like North Korea with nothing, with nothing outside, nothing beyond, and without the technology of North Korea even. So a complete like hunter-gatherer subsistence existence, to be willing to walk towards the light, or should I say towards the light bulb, yeah. For love. I'll quote the Twilight Zone, one of the best episodes, I think, the OG Twilight Zone, when the guy goes to the moon, or he goes to space, comes back 40 years later. The woman he loves, she went to sleep to stay young for him. Meanwhile, he stayed up so he could be old for her.
Oh, yes,
Very
I remember
tragic.
that.
Yeah, how good is that episode? And the and his colleague tells him, like, how fortunate I am to have known a man who gives such primacy to love, such primacy to love. So even though the female in Anthem is sort of, quote, following her man, she is following her man, like that use of italics I just used there. All right, we're going to be back on YouTube in 30 minutes with Nikos, Ellen Kenner, Annie Vinther Sanz for a special on a year of COVID lockdowns around the world. Can you believe it's been a year already? What a year it's been. We laughed, we cried. I feel like we've all really grown and made some great friends along the way. So that's coming up right here on Ayn Rand Center UK's YouTube channel at the bottom of this hour. So don't go anywhere, but also do go somewhere. Come join us on Clubhouse right now. We're jumping over to Clubhouse. This was an interesting conversation. As always, I was basically unprepared, found out the topic right before the show, but I feel like we pulled it off because we are improvisers at the end of the day. Ain't it the truth?
Right on.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone who watched. Join us on Clubhouse now, and goodbye.
See you.